Karl Malone currently stands at number 2 on the points leaderboard, although he will get surpassed by LeBron soon. As of now, he scored more points than any other player in history besides Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. He had 17 seasons, yes 17 seasons, where he played at least 80 games. The man was a beast, a machine. He had arguably the greatest durability out of any other player we've ever seen. Hell, it's not even arguable. He stood at 6'9", 250 pounds, who spent most of his time bumping and bruising in the paint. It's incredible how he basically had no injuries for his entire career, well, until he joined the Lakers in his last season. In fact, Karl even says it's a joke how all these current players are wearing so much padding and gear, yet they still get injured. This is what he said years ago. "I'm not concerned with your elbow pads, your knee pads, all of your garb, and your full body armor. What do you need all that for? Our soldiers need that in Iraq, and they're doing a hell of a job for us. Who are you protecting yourself from? There's no sniper in this building, man up." With that being said, not many people talk about Karl anymore. They never say anything about his on-court production because they're too busy talking about his off-court production, a controversial part of his life which many people despise him for. Anyway, how's it going, folks? My name's Andy, and today we're going to talk about Karl Malone. How good was he actually? Also, if you enjoyed the video, make sure to subscribe. If you like the content, drop a sub or a like, and thank you so much for the support. Back in college, Karl had a solid career at Louisiana Tech. He averaged about 19 points and 9 rebounds in his 3 seasons there, but later on, the school would retire his jersey. The thing is, he was never considered a top-tier prospect. He was good, but in the 1985 draft, all eyes were on Patrick Ewing, a center from Georgetown, and the only player from that class who people thought would be a franchise-changing player. In hindsight, the 85 draft was amazing. A lot of All-Stars and Hall of Famers were drafted later on in this class, including Joe Dumars, Detlef Schrempf, Chris Mullin, Charles Oakley, and Karl Malone himself. With the 13th pick of the draft, the Utah Jazz drafted Karl, filling their hole at power forward and teaming him up with a young, up-and-coming John Stockton. In Karl's rookie season, the Utah Jazz were led by Adrian Dantley, a lethal scorer who averaged 30 points a game. It was basically Dantley's team, although he was never known to be a great teammate. As great of a player he was, he only focused on getting his stats and not really caring about anything else. Karl still had a great showing. He quickly found himself in the starting lineup and became the second leading scorer on the team. The Jazz would eventually make the playoffs and lose in the first round, but it was clear that Karl was an up-and-coming star. In the playoffs, he was the leading scorer on the team, averaging close to 22 points a game. The more experienced Dallas Mavericks got the best of him, but this was only the start of Karl's journey. By 1988, Karl made his first ever All-Star game, his first All-NBA team, and his first All-Defensive team, with averages of nearly 28 and 12. Karl became the new face of power forwards around the NBA. Along with the rise of John Stockton, the two would form a formidable duo, one of the most iconic pairs in the history of sports. Karl revolutionized the position and what it means to be a power forward. Unlike the super explosive and undersized Charles Barkley, Karl did not have the same flash or flair, but what he did provide was stability and consistency, and his ability to roll to the rim was ahead of his time. As I mentioned earlier, Karl's body was ahead of anybody else in his era. While players obviously worked out a lot, Karl took it to a whole nother level. He religiously hit the weight room. There's an article that talks about his entire workout routine. Back in the 1980s, nobody took weightlifting as seriously as him. Back in the 1980s, nobody else took weightlifting as seriously as he did. He once said, "I was going to be good at whatever I did because I was going to put the time in and the effort in, and I was going to make the sacrifices to be good." I think by lifting weights, you get power. I also think that you get focus, direction, discipline, and patience. As he continued to train and get stronger, his game also got a lot better, as he was physically stronger than everybody at his position. Some would say he was quite a dirty player as well, as Karl's greatest weapon was probably his flying elbows. But over the years, he refined the finesse aspects of his game, Despite being a putrid free throw shooter before, as he shot just 48% as a rookie, he worked his way up to the mid-70s, hitting about 76% of them. Although he was never a three-point shooter, his mid-range shot got significantly better by his 5th season in the NBA. He developed a nice elbow jumper, which he would frequently use. His greatest scoring season came during the 1989-90 campaign. Karl averaged a career-high 31 points a game, along with a career-high 56% from the field. He also shot over 11 free throws a game, which seems like a lot, but he probably deserved a lot more. Dude was getting hacked all the time in the paint. This season was coincidentally Jerry Sloan's first season as Utah's head coach. So maybe it wasn't a coincidence. Previously, Utah had a decent offense, but they were still in the bottom half of the league in efficiency. After Sloan became head coach, they would become a top 5 offensive team for multiple seasons. With Malone's dominance, Stockton's development, and Sloan coming in as the new coach, the Jazz finally started to make some real noise. The issue was, the Western Conference was starting to get very competitive. Teams like the Rockets, the Sonics, the Blazers, the Spurs, and the Suns, they were all in the mix, all desperately fighting to get out of the West and reach the finals, to take a crack at the Bulls. The Jazz won around 50 to 55 games consistently, but that means absolutely nothing. Winning 50 games could easily lead to a first-round exit, which is what happened to the Jazz in 1989 and 1990. Over time, the Jazz would slowly make progress, although sometimes it would be difficult. Besides the Houston Rockets, who had a great 2-year stretch in 94 and 95, there really was no best team in the West. Everyone was on equal footing, which was good and bad. For the Jazz, they were able to reach the conference finals 3 different times from 1992 to 1996. The thing is, it was just as likely for them to get knocked out of the first round just like that. That's what happened in 1993 and 1995. It just shows how competitive this Western Conference was. Fortunately, the Jazz finally had their breakthrough in 1997. Karl was getting older, he was 33 years old, and time was running out, but this would be the year he won his first MVP. The Jazz won a franchise record 64 games. In the 1997 Western Conference Finals, John Stockton's game winner boosted them into the finals, a long-awaited matchup against the Chicago Bulls. A common thing that fans love to say about Karl Malone is, well, he was a great player, but he was a playoff choker. While it's not fair to say he choked, but there were some times when he really underperformed. Based on raw numbers, his career stats in the regular season and the playoffs are about the same, but his percentages dropped a whopping 5% in the playoffs. The 1997 finals was a good example of this. His shot selection and free throw shooting was awful. While the Bulls were no question a great defensive team, Karl's matchup in the low block was supposed to favor him. He normally overpowers Dennis Rodman and Luke Longley, but he couldn't take advantage of that matchup. Maybe it was age, the wear and tear on Karl's body was accumulating, and even though this was his MVP season, he was not as dominant as he was back in the early 90s. A year later, the 98 finals would be a similar story, except his late-game turnover was recognized as the biggest blunder of his career. In the seasons after, Malone, Stockton, and the Jazz would continue making the playoffs but not get very far. Surprisingly, he would also win the 1999 MVP, which is like the most forgettable MVP award ever. I didn't even remember that when I was making this video. Years later, Karl would make one more attempt to win a championship by joining the Lakers. But of course, we all know how that turned out. Maybe it would have been different if Karl wasn't injured, but either way, this would be his final season in the NBA. So how good was he actually? Well, by the end of his career, he accumulated a massive list of accolades. 14-time All-Star, 14-time All-NBA, 4-time All-Defense, 2-time MVP, and a first-ballot Hall of Famer. In my opinion, he's the second best power forward of all time, a top 20 player of all time. He changed how the NBA looked at the power forward position. Power forwards didn't have to be one-dimensional post-up players and rebounders. While he was remembered as a scorer, he was a great passer out of the block, and he had some years when he made first-team all-defense, too. Though at times he was somewhat a dirty player, and he kinda had a child with a 13-year-old at the age of 20. But besides that, anyway, he's also the greatest pick-and-roll finisher of all time, and nobody is gonna question that. If Stockton was the engine that kept the car going, then Malone was the guy in the driver's seat. Anyway, that's all folks. That sums up the career of Karl Malone. Let me know your thoughts on him and where would you rank him? Let me know in the comments. Thank you all so much for watching. I hope y'all enjoyed the video. And of course, as always, I'll see you next time. Peace.